Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk. I'm your host, Malynda, and I'm joined by my husband, John Volk, of course. And today, calling in, we have my brother from another mother, Mr. Drexel Hurd. He is a Democratic political analyst and strategist, and can I say what your title is?
Sure.
He's also the executive director of the LA Democratic Party. I'm so proud of him. So welcome. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad to be here, and I know that you guys are running off of little sleep right now, but
we're trying. You know, she's doing pretty well. I get things done when she's strapped to my chest, but I can't get her used to that. Otherwise,
well, she'll always be strapped.
She's gonna grow up.
Yeah,
sleeping on mama's chest.
It's like, this ain't gonna happen. You're 5 years old. Go to your bed.
Wait, what did you call it? Is this the Quarantine Chronicles?
The Quarantine Chronicles of We Need to Talk. Yes. How are you holding up, Drexel?
I'm pretty good. So far, so good. I can't complain. I know other people are having it far worse. So, I try to think of it as a situation that I can't personally complain about, because there's nothing really for me to complain about. The only thing I would be complaining about is not being able to see my friends, but that's not a good enough reason to say that I'm not holding up well, right? So, I get to see my friends via Zoom often. We do little happy hours and things like that. I'm working from home. I know a lot of people aren't working, and so I think when people complain, they better have a damn good reason to complain. When I'm sure they have it far less worse than other people. So,
amen to that. You better let them know.
I wonder if people are complaining more now or less now.
That's a good question.
I think of it more like, like in school, if you have 4 hours to write a paper, or if you have 40 hours to write a paper, you can get it done. That paper either takes you 4 hours or it takes you 40 hours. Mm-hmm. I think if you just give people this, I don't know. I think it's the same. I think it's similar.
Probably.
Well, but also it's people are complaining about inconveniences.
Right.
There's a difference in the people that are complaining about inconveniences than the people that are complaining about the fact that they can't, get through the unemployment line, or hotline, or that, rent coming up and stuff like that. Those are things to complain about.
Right.
Those are things to worry about. But complaining is a little bit different. So.
And also, I think the things that people, I don't want to judge, but some of the things that they're complaining about are a little bit trivial.
Right. Well, the some of the stuff you're seeing.
Yeah. The people that are protesting about wanting their haircuts, get a pair of scissors and figure it out.
But also, let's see what your real hair color is.
Right. That's kind of the problem. We're seeing what people really look like now.
Right, but I don't know that they're the haircut piece for a lot of these people is such a. I don't think they're really complaining about the haircut. They're complaining about the idea that the government is telling them what they can and cannot do.
Which is so ironic. Considering most of those people don't like protesters when it's something about the government and telling them what to do. Right,
but also they certainly are the same people that like to have the government tell women what to do with their bodies.
Exactly.
Who people can marry. They don't have a problem with any of that.
Well, those things don't affect them.
Right. And the moment that that they can't do something, and look, at the end of the day, certain ethnicities are a little bit more vocal about their inconveniences.
Yes.
I
don't know what you're talking about.
That becomes a thing.
It's okay to say, there's a certain level of privilege that is involved in this. It's okay. Yes. You're sugarcoating it. You're being nice.
I guess if I'm playing the devil's advocate, though, if you are used to a different standard of everything, then when it deviates from that standard, it's, you know what I mean? It's if you wouldn't tell someone, hey, don't be sad because people are worse off than you. That's kind of valid, but on the flip side, you wouldn't say you can't be happy because people are happier than you. It's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's not like states are. Every state is going through the same thing, and it's not exclusive to Georgia or Texas or Florida or Missouri. Like the death tolls or the number of cases per capita compared to population, are basically the same. Here in LA County, our numbers look bad, but compared to the amount of people that we have just in LA County alone,
right,
we're actually doing
pretty well. Yeah. Agreed. Even though this past weekend there were a lot of people at the beach in Huntington Beach because of the heat wave. Oh yeah, the pictures were terrible.
Imagine.
Which then I didn't know what to be upset about people taking pictures of it, because it's like, you're there too.
That's funny.
Right. And I think part of that has to do with the fact that Huntington Beach, or at least in certain areas of Orange County, are a little bit more Republican, and their mayors are doing things a little bit differently.
Yes, for sure.
But there's two ways we can look at this. One, and I know we're going to talk about politics in a second, but one, either it's going to go really well for some of these governors, or it's going to go really bad. It's like 50-50. Where California has put in probably the most stringent stay-at-home orders in the country, it works for California for our population. In certain other states, it might work out differently for them. Now, either all of those people who went out over the weekend are going to get sick, or they're not. We just don't know what's going to happen. So 2 or 3 weeks from now, we're going to know.
Right.
And if 2 or 3 weeks from now we don't have this, we're still at the same level that we're at right now, maybe that's something that governors need to take a look at and say, okay, well, it didn't necessarily affect, opening up didn't really affect as bad as we thought it was going to. And now we can start to inch things over. I think who's really going to affect, of course, are those older Americans who are not going to feel comfortable. I had a conversation with people the other day, even from the party standpoint, where a lot of our members are older.
Yeah. And
I said, at the end of the day, we're going to have to get to a point where we just rip the Band-Aid off. And we say either we're going to do it or we're not. Right. Because at the end of the day, nobody is ever going to feel comfortable going out unless they just go out.
That's true.
Like I know people who are like, I won't even go to the grocery store. I said, how do you live? So I think some people are just going to have to figure out their comfort level, and eventually they're either going to stay inside the whole time, or they're going to have to venture out, and they're going to have to make that decision. But it's not going to stop the rest of everybody else from going out.
Right. I mean, and speaking on that, there's definitely a level of fear that's been kind of instilled into everybody, even when these orders are lifted and we can go out. I don't think people are going to be going out in droves. I think it's going to take a long time for people to feel comfortable. And again, it's fine. It's different. It's going to be different for everybody, and we'll just have to wait and see. But I do want to talk to you a little bit just about, for example, Governor Newsom and Governor Cuomo, and they've been kind of pushed into the spotlight a little bit just with how they've been handling this pandemic. And I'm just curious your thoughts on how they've covered it in comparison to other governors in other states.
Well, here in California, I think Governor Newsom's really done a great job of monitoring, coming up with a plan, and executing in a way that makes sense. Just this past weekend, the governor announced that he's going to be working with restaurants to provide meals for older Californians. And making sure for no cost, 3 meals a day, no cost. A week before, or days before that, the governor announced that he's going to be working with nonprofit organizations and providing nonprofit organizations funding to be able to provide those undocumented immigrants who put in a lot of money into California's economy to provide them with funds that they would not be able to get from the federal government. So those are the things that the governor has been working on to kind of help curb some of that piece of it. A few weeks ago we had the USS whatever ship that come into port, and that the amount of testing that was able to be done during that time, I think, was really important. I think Governor Cuomo is in the same boat. Where he's trying to balance, a state that relies so heavily on so many different factors like the metro, and tourism. California relies heavily on tourism, but we're not bound by certain aspects like New York is. So,
right.
I think every governor is going to be in a different situation. Obviously very different from Governor Kemp in Georgia and Governor DeSantis in Florida. Who they're not even thinking. They're thinking, and sure, it is the Republican or the more conservative or libertarian mentality that of limited government. But at the end of the day, a governor or a president's job is to protect the citizens in that state first, and that should always be the priority. Not protecting, their businesses, and yes, we will eventually get to that, but you can't. You're not going to have a thriving economy if people are dead.
Right.
And so I think that's something that we're going to see. And like I said, who knows? 3 weeks from now, we're going to see the effects that Governor DeSantis' lifting of his stay-at-home orders are going to have on Florida.
Right.
You saw the president try to confuse Americans by one day telling governors they should reopen their states, but then 2 days later,
he has total authority.
The vice president, the vice said he has total authority, and then 3 days later, telling Governor Kemp that he didn't think reopening Georgia on Friday was a good idea.
Yeah. So
they don't know what they're doing right
now.
And the president's message is unclear, and I think that will have a lot to do with how people will react 2 or 3 months from now when they decide they're comfortable going out. If you're not comfortable, if you don't know who to believe when it's time to go out, that's a problem.
Right, and I think the biggest thing that's been frustrating for me, and I say this the last couple episodes, every time I turn on, CNN or anything that's showing the president's press conferences, is the inconsistencies and then the gaslighting. And I can't, for the life of me, for people that still support him, would feel comfortable and safe and reassured during this time, just hearing the things that he says.
Well, and it's not necessarily about what he says, right? They know he's an idiot.
Well, some don't, though.
Well, what I mean to say is they don't like that other people are calling him an idiot.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
They don't like to hear that, and they will protect him at all costs, even if it is detrimental to them. And so when the president's out there talking about suggesting bleach and a disinfectant, you've got Trump supporters on Twitter, and some verified, being like, well, that's not what he said. What he said was bleach-like. Is there something bleach-like? I'm like, well, that's not exactly what he said. Like, you're trying to spin it into what you think he said, but roll back the tape.
Right.
And so I think that there are some people are a little bit delusional when it comes to, that, and the fact that they want to protect the president from what they call the lamestream media.
Right.
And even to the point where, the New York Times ran an article a couple of days ago, or even yesterday, saying that Republicans are taking a hit across the country because of the president's daily press briefings. And they are advising him, including the advisors around him, not to do these daily press briefings. So what did the president do today? He went out there on Twitter and said, oh, well, the media is not covering me well, so I'm not going to do daily press briefings. Mm-hmm. Oh, why should I be doing that? Well, no. We know that the reality is that basically at this point you've seen that you are the cause of a lot of these problems. The bleach, even the bleach comment alone, Maryland had to send out basically alerts to citizens saying, please do not ingest bleach because their poison control unit had gotten over 100 calls about it within the first few hours, right? There are effects that are happening across the country. New York had cases, so different states are dealing with the president's rhetoric a little bit differently, and the president's out there blaming the media for covering him and for giving him what he likes to call basically bad questions or whatever he calls them.
Right.
Instead of saying, no, the tape doesn't lie. And the tape will never lie. The Access Hollywood tape didn't lie, and neither will the press briefings. So here we are.
I think it's an interesting, this particular issue, a pandemic, which is it's not a human-made thing. You're not sparring with, the North Korean dictator who may or may not be dead. It's not some other kind of personality where what you say doesn't really matter. And I think a lot of some Trump fans who I know, they don't put much weight at all on what he actually says day to day. They just think of it as just kind of somewhat an entertainment value. But they know, but the Trump brand is something that I'm behind because it represents my interests well. But what he says, I don't particularly like the bluster, but
their interests are protected.
Yeah, my interests are protected. Where with this pandemic, you actually can't tweet your way out of it. You can't. A virus doesn't respond in a way that is great for ratings, and what you say actually matters. So I'm actually interested to see where this takes his overall rating. Because again, even if you are a super Trump supporter, if you know people who have come down with this virus and it's not quite like the flu, or you have someone who dies, how does that look? And what are you willing to believe?
Right. And, I think that, to be honest with you, I think that there are some things that our party can do, the Democratic Party can do, or haven't done. For example, Democrats tried to put in a provision where that the Congress, or to create an independent panel of oversight on the stimulus money that went out to businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Republicans stripped that because they wanted to make sure that the Secretary of the Treasury had complete oversight and can basically be the one to approve and disapprove those loans. What we ended up seeing was who ended up getting those loans.
Right.
And what Democrats haven't gone out there and said every day for the past few days is, this is why we wanted to put that in there. Because now we're seeing that small businesses are not getting the funds that they have requested. We've seen a number of minority-owned businesses in the 1% or 2% area, which are not getting any sort of federal stimulus loan money, and now we're having to pump in. Now you're forcing companies to give that money back when there should have been a little bit more oversight to begin with. And so, I think that that would have been politically an opportunity for Democrats to say, this is why Republicans can't govern. This is why this White House can't govern. And this is why we need to win in November. So there are reasons and ways that we could be doing this a little bit better.
Do you think that this pandemic as a whole is going to affect the Republican Party negatively? Do you think that we're going to see a change in even people maybe changing their party or not voting for Trump in November? Because I am concerned that even throughout this, there are people that are blindly supporting him when it's clear he's not what's best for this country, in my opinion.
I don't think that it will have an effect on. It goes back to what I said earlier about what's happening in Florida and Georgia. Mm-hmm. It depends on what happens, and either the governors are going to go out there because they're going to try to spin it as fast as possible. If the numbers are low, and if there's a slight increase in death, but not as much as they thought it was going to be, they're going to spin it in their favor. They're going to say, we didn't, the numbers weren't as bad as they were projected, but we were able to open our economy back up, and other governors should follow suit, right? That's what they're going to say. and we don't want California and New York values telling the rest of the country how we should be protecting our citizens. That's what they're going to say. Mm-hmm. So the brand itself will be able to survive if it works out in their favor. Governing is a little bit governing from nationally is a little bit different, and Trump himself might take the hit because he's incompetent. But I think that the party might not take a hit. Mm-hmm. And eventually Republicans are going to either coalesce around that message from Kemp and DeSantis and a couple other people, especially the Republicans, the vulnerable Republican senators, or they are going to get wiped out in November. So it's all 50-50. It's not even like a who's going to take the hit. Mm-hmm. Democrats, we can go out there and say we did everything that we knew based on science to make the most accurate decision possible mm-hmm. about how we should move forward. And some people are going to balk at science. And either science is going to take a hit or science is going to be used more often. So we'll see what happens.
I've recently seen a lot of people kind of comment, because at this point we kind of know that Biden is going to be mm-hmm. the nominee in November. But they're kind of disappointed or looking for things, I feel, for his lack of response, rather, to this pandemic and not helping out and not really speaking up on that. And I'm curious your thoughts on commentary that you've seen that has kind of been leaning that way. Because I feel like people are trying to find stuff wrong with Biden no matter what.
Sure. And I think that there's two things that I always kind of tell people. One, and it's the same thing with the criticism with Barack Obama, right? Like, mm-hmm. everybody out there was like, the president should be saying this and that and the third. There is a level of, and Joe Biden falls into that because he's a statesman and he's been around for a long time. There is a level of what they call the presidents and vice presidents club, mm-hmm. where they don't really go out there and talk about a response in real time as much. Mm-hmm. Now, and I think that the vice president's been trying to balance that out over the past few weeks by letting Trump govern, because that's what he needs to do, and maybe even letting him hang himself on his own rope. But at the same time, wanting to provide accurate information. And we've seen the vice president, first of all, what can the vice president do right now? He can't go out and he can't go out in rallies. He can't have these brown tables. He can't do anything like that. He can be online. And when the vice president is online, people are like, well, I haven't seen the vice president. And then you send them a link, and you're like, oh, well, I didn't see that. Okay, well, whose fault is that? Like, he's out there saying that kind of stuff. This weekend, on Monday, or tomorrow, I'm sorry, Senator Harris is doing a roundtable with black leaders to talk about the effects of the coronavirus on the black community, for the Biden campaign. Mm-hmm. So, it's under the Biden brand right now. And so they've been doing small things like that. I think that people who wouldn't have necessarily who would not and are not necessarily paying attention to the vice president are not going to find those things out there. And the media is not in a position right now, nor were they in 2016, to give anybody else but Donald Trump the oxygen in the room as it pertains to the news cycle. So, if you're not out there seeing Joe Biden, it's either A, because you're not looking hard enough, or you're not following the vice president, or B, is because the media is not giving the vice president an opportunity to do that. And so I think that, would I much rather see the vice president on a primetime situation other than a Disney sing-along? Sure. But that's not a feel-good moment for Americans and the media. No, seriously, and the media is not going to give them that opportunity.
Right.
So, I loved that Disney sing-along the other day. But if people are looking for Joe Biden or looking for leadership, which one do you want? Do you want the feel-good, or do you want the truth?
Right.
Who do you think... Sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was
going to say, in the absence of this, let's just assume that there will be no large-scale gatherings, at least from now until the end of November.
Yeah.
Who does that benefit more, Trump or Biden?
I think it benefits well, it depends on how you look at it, right?
Yeah.
I think it benefits Joe Biden in a way that Trump, like Bernie Sanders, relied heavily on large-scale rallies.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And rallies don't necessarily turn into votes, right? And we saw that in 2016. Donald Trump lost to Hillary Clinton by millions of votes.
Yeah.
And we saw that, honestly, with Bernie and Biden, if we're going to be honest.
Right, and we saw that too, right? So Bernie Sanders might have been out there getting these 10,000, like, I still see it from these people. And people are like, people like posting memes of like Biden or Bernie rallies being like, the establishment Democrats, didn't want this to happen or some shit like that.
Yeah.
And so you're like, no, that's not how that works. Like the establishment Democrats aren't ballot hard. We're not going out there and being like, telling people, like we're not orchestrating the vote, right? Everybody can vote in their own way.
Right, you have to show up.
Yeah, exactly. And Bernie was never good about. He was good about getting people to show up, and I think a lot of people who were at those rallies just liked the idea of saying, "I went to a Bernie Sanders rally."
Right.
I see that for
sure. And sure, listen. If I didn't dislike Bernie Sanders so much, I probably would have gone to a rally. Just to say I went to a rally.
Right. Have some kombucha.
And
chant along. No, I'm kidding.
Right. No. But if Bernie was the nominee, I would have gone out there, campaigned for him, done everything that I need to do. But at the end of the day, those votes did not translate to. Those numbers didn't translate to voters.
Yeah.
And you've got those people out there that have been like, well, Bernie should have been out there talking, particularly in places like South Carolina. Now they're going back and being like, well, Bernie tried this. Bernie didn't do this. Well, Bernie had a cadre of black advisors around him. From Breonna Joy, who's running her mouth now,
right.
to who's that other guy? Who's that little controversial guy? I don't even remember his name. To Sean King, and how I feel about Sean. Out there running their mouths, and somehow the person that they were also enamored with, they're now saying, well, Bernie didn't really listen to us. So then so not only are you out there trying to defend him, but he wasn't listening to you in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, people change with, like, water,
With the wind.
Yeah.
With the wind. And you're like, okay, so that's why he lost South Carolina, because he was not listening to the black people on his campaign. Nina Turner, same thing. But then again, at the end of the day, black people aren't out there trusting Nina Turner. She hasn't proven herself enough to be trusted.
Right.
She hasn't won anything but a statewide election, and then she lost her reelect.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, why would I listen to you?
Well, before we wrap it up, because we have a child and she's going to start crying in a minute. What do you want to say to people in regards to voting and being prepared for this election coming up in November? Like, what do you want people to focus on and really look into in their doing their research? I mean, I know you're part of the Biden camp and supporting Biden because we just want to get Trump out. But what do you want people to really look at when they are making their decision, especially Bernie supporters?
Sure, I think that I'll give you an example of like what we're going to be focused on this election as the LA County Democratic Party, which are the issues.
Mm-hmm.
Biden is the brand. The issues are what we all kind of, the platform and issues are what we all kind of coalesce around at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you are interested in progress, then Joe Biden is the guy.
Okay.
And if you were pretend interested in progress and mad that it's not going as far as you want it to, then you were never interested in progress to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just a matter of being smart about your vote and looking at issues. Joe Biden. There are some analysts that say Joe Biden has some of the most progressive ideas than Hillary Clinton did. There are areas in which the vice president is not. And that's the one glaring issue that everybody currently has. Not everybody. That I think a lot of Sanders supporters are most disappointed in, and that's Medicare for all. But if you are hinging your vote on one issue, then you are never interested in progress. And because there are so many more things that are equally as important, that affect so many other people here in the country and around the world than just Medicare for all.
Right.
And we're seeing that daily in environmental issues. We're seeing that daily in criminal justice issues. We're seeing that daily, in education issues, in decisions from the Supreme Court, and different things like that. So, while Medicare for all might be a huge issue that we should be considering and talking about often, especially during this pandemic, it's not, it's not. If Medicare for all was really truly something that people wanted, we would have had it by now.
Yeah,
we would have had it.
Yeah,
because people would have voted in a way that made sense on both sides. But nobody is interested, and you've heard me say this before, nobody, the moral aspect of helping other people is not something that a majority of Americans are interested in. So until we get over that moral hump, we're not getting it Medicare for all.
I mean, we're even saying that with this pandemic, with people not staying at home because it doesn't affect them, even though it could affect another person. We know what the heart of people is here. Yeah.
That is the going to the beaches and not staying at home is like the non-Medicare for all.
Agreed.
Either you want to help people or you don't. Which side do you want to be on?
And there's no gray area. It's one or the other.
And a majority, even though 60% of respondents have said that they are for Medicare for all, like the president goes out there and says that he has a 90% approval rating amongst Republicans. Well, that's 90% of a small fraction of the country. Democrats and independents outpace Republicans in voter registration across the country, and even a small portion of that still don't like a small portion of the Republican Party don't like the president. So, I think when we look at 60% of people out there saying they're for Medicare for all, it's 60% of what, and in what numbers. So, and obviously, if we've been talking about that for years, and it hasn't changed people's minds, like Bernie Sanders, you've been talking about the same thing for 40 years, and you still haven't changed people's minds that much to vote for it,
then it's just not going to happen.
Right. Then you might want to change tactics.
Well,
and you might want to start talking about the morality of it instead of this is what we should be doing.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this pandemic ends up ending, whenever it ends, and how it will affect the election in November. But Drexel, thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
Anytime. Keep my goddaughter safe and
healthy. We will, because we can't go anywhere. All right, guys, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.